am Dora Thompson, 68 years old, and I own one of the largest hospital systems in the country. When my only grandson was about to be born, I rushed to the hospital with gifts and excitement. But at the maternity ward, a security guard stopped me cold. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your daughter-in-law only authorized close family." Stunned, I replied, "All right, take the day off." What she didn't know was that I owned the hospital. If you're watching from a hospital waiting room or anywhere else, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join me for more family stories with unexpected twists. The day I founded Heartland Health 40 years ago, I never imagined it would grow into a network of 20 hospitals across 3 states. I started with a single clinic and a vision to provide quality healthcare to underserved communities. My late husband James supported my dream until cancer took him when I was just 40. Since then, I poured everything into building my healthcare empire, perhaps to fill the void his absence left in my life. Now, I live alone in a spacious colonial home in the Boston suburbs. The house feels too big sometimes, especially since my only son William moved out to start his own family. Will is a brilliant neurosurgeon, though he chose to work at Memorial Hospital rather than joining my network. He always valued making his own way, something I respected, even if it stung a little. 3 years ago, Will married Julia Sanders, a dedicated ICU nurse from a middle-class family in Connecticut. From the first time we met, there was a certain tension between us. Julia seemed uncomfortable with the wealth and status that came with marrying into our family. She was fiercely independent, had worked hard for her nursing degree, and prided herself on being self-sufficient. "I've always paid my own way," she told me during our first dinner together. "I don't want anyone thinking I'm with Will for his family money." I admired her independence, but worried she mistook my generosity for control. When I offered to help with their wedding expenses, Julia insisted they would handle everything themselves. When I suggested properties in our neighborhood, they might like Julia found an apartment across town. Every gesture I made seemed to push her further away. Will often found himself mediating between us. "Mom, Julia just needs time to adjust," he would say. "She's not used to having someone who can solve problems with money." When they announced Julia was pregnant, I was overjoyed. A grandchild would give me a second chance to create the family bonds I'd neglected while building my business. I immediately began preparing a nursery in my home, buying the finest crib stroller and baby clothes money could buy. "Mom, this is too much," Will said when he saw the nursery. "Julia is already feeling overwhelmed about the baby. All these gifts are making her anxious." "But I want to help," I protested. "What's wrong with wanting the best for my grandchild?" "Nothing's wrong with that," Will sighed. "But Julia feels like you're taking over. She wants to choose the baby's things herself, even if they're not as expensive." I reluctantly returned most of the items, but the pattern continued throughout Julia's pregnancy. Every suggestion I made was politely declined. Every offer of help was gently rebuffed. With each rejection, the distance between us grew, and I worried about what this would mean for my relationship with my future grandchild. Will tried his best to balance his loyalties between his wife and his mother. "Give her space, Mom," he would advise. Julia's pregnancy is difficult enough without feeling pressured. So I stepped back and waited, hoping things would change once the baby arrived. On a rainy Tuesday morning in April, 3 weeks before Julia's due date, my phone rang at 6:00 a.m. My heart jumped when I saw it was Will calling. "Mom!" His voice was breathless with excitement and anxiety. "Julia's in labor. We're heading to Memorial Hospital now." "I'll be right there," I said, already out of bed and searching for my clothes. "How is she doing?" "The contractions started about an hour ago. They're coming pretty quickly." There was a pause, then he added, "Mom, you can come to the hospital, but Julia's a bit stressed. Maybe wait in the visitor's lounge until after the delivery." I felt a small twinge of hurt, but pushed it aside. "Of course, whatever makes her comfortable. I'll bring some things for the baby." "Thanks, Mom. I've got to go." He hung up abruptly. I rushed around gathering the small gifts I'd been saving for this day. A silver rattle that had belonged to Will as a baby, a hand-knit blanket, and a small stuffed elephant. I also packed some toiletries and comfortable clothes for Julia, though I wasn't sure she'd accept them. As I drove to Memorial Hospital, a complex emotion settled in my chest. This should have been the happiest day of my life since Will was born. But instead, I felt like an outsider. I couldn't help wondering why they had chosen Memorial Hospital instead of Heartland Regional, the flagship hospital in my network, which had the top-rated maternity ward in the state. What Will and Julia didn't know was that I had recently finalized negotiations to acquire Memorial Hospital. The paperwork had been signed just last week, though the public announcement wouldn't come for another month. It was a strategic acquisition to expand Heartland's presence in the eastern part of the city. But I never expected my first visit, as the new owner would be for the birth of my grandson. When I arrived at the hospital, I asked the receptionist for directions to the maternity floor. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt endless. When the doors opened, I spotted Julia's parents, Nancy and Robert Sanders, already seated in the waiting area. Nancy was flipping through a magazine while Robert stared at his phone. "Hello, Nancy." "Hello, Robert," I said, approaching them with a smile. "Any news yet?" They looked up, their expressions cooling slightly at the sight of me. Our relationship had always been cordial but distant. I sometimes sensed they felt intimidated by my wealth and position. "Dora," Nancy nodded. "No news yet. They took Julia back about 40 minutes ago. The doctor said it could be several hours." "Will texted that everything's progressing normally," Robert added, not looking up from his phone. I sat down across from them, placing my gift bag on the empty seat beside me. "It's exciting, isn't it? Our first grandchild." Nancy's smile tightened. "Yes, very exciting. Julia asked me to be in the delivery room with her and Will. I'm just waiting for the nurse to call me back." The comment stung like a slap. Julia had invited her mother into the delivery room, but had asked me to wait in the lounge. I worked to keep my expression neutral. "How wonderful," I said. "I'm sure Julia will appreciate having you there." Nancy nodded, returning to her magazine. The conversation died, and we settled into an uncomfortable silence. I pulled out my phone and pretended to check emails, but inside, I was fighting back tears of disappointment. 4 hours passed with no word from Will. The waiting room had filled with other expectant families, their excited chatter a stark contrast to the frosty silence at our end of the room. Nancy had been called back to the delivery room 2 hours ago, leaving Robert and me to sit in awkward silence. "I'm going to get some coffee," Robert announced suddenly. "Would you like some?" "No, thank you," I replied, surprised by the offer. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to me all morning. After he left, I checked my phone again. No messages from Will. I sent him a text. "Any updates? I'm still in the waiting room." No response. Another hour passed. Robert returned with coffee, drank it silently, then announced he was going to stretch his legs. I decided to do the same. Sitting still with my anxieties was becoming unbearable. I approached the nurse's station where a young woman in blue scrubs was updating charts on a computer. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm wondering if there's any news about Julia Thompson. She's in labor and I've been waiting for several hours." The nurse looked up and smiled. "Let me check for you. Are you family?" "Yes. I'm Dora Thompson, the baby's grandmother." She typed something into her computer, then frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, but you're not listed as an approved visitor for Mrs. Thompson's room." "There must be some mistake," I said, a knot forming in my stomach. "I'm her mother-in-law." "I understand, ma'am, but we have strict policies about maternity ward visitors. The patient provides a list of approved visitors and—" She glanced at her screen again. "I'm afraid your name isn't here. Only William Thompson and Nancy and Robert Sanders are authorized." I felt as though someone had knocked the wind out of me. "I see. Thank you for checking." I walked back to the waiting area in a daze. Robert had not returned, and when I checked the chair where he'd been sitting, I noticed his jacket was gone. Had they been called back without telling me? I tried calling Will, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me back as soon as possible. Then I sent a text. "Son, I'm still at the hospital. Is everything okay?" 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a reply. "Everything's fine, Mom. Julia's still in labor. Nancy is with us now. Please wait in the lounge and I'll come find you after the baby is born." I stared at the message, hurt blooming in my chest. Not only was I not welcome in the delivery room, but it seemed I wasn't even welcome for the first visit after the birth. What had I done to deserve this exclusion from such an important family moment? By early afternoon, my patience had reached its limit. 6 hours in the waiting room with no real updates was more than I could bear. I decided to try one more time to at least get closer to where my son and his wife were. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor where the maternity suites were located. A sign on the wall directed visitors to check in at the security desk before entering the ward. I approached the desk where an older man with graying hair and a security uniform sat reading a newspaper. "Good afternoon," I said. "I'm here to check on my daughter-in-law, Julia Thompson." The security guard, whose name tag read Frank, looked up and consulted a clipboard. Thompson. Ah, here we are. And you are?" "Dora Thompson. I'm the baby's grandmother." Frank's expression changed subtly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but I can't allow you into the maternity ward. The patient has only authorized certain family members for visitation." I felt heat rising to my face. I am family. I'm the paternal grandmother. I understand that, ma'am, Frank said, his voice taking on a practiced tone of sympathy that only irritated me further. But Mrs. Thompson has specifically requested limited visitors at this time. Hospital policy is to respect the mother's wishes. Could you at least call into the room and let my son know I'm here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm afraid I can't disturb them right now, Frank replied. The labor is still in progress. I took a deep breath, fighting to control my emotions. Let me understand this. My daughter-in-law has explicitly stated that I, the grandmother of her child, am not considered close family. Frank shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I don't make the rules or the lists. I just enforce them. The patient indicated that only her husband and her parents are allowed in at this time. Something inside me snapped. Decades of being in control of building an empire where my word was final had not prepared me for this moment of complete powerlessness. Here I was standing outside a room where my grandson was about to be born, being treated like an unwelcome stranger. All right, I said, my voice suddenly calm. Take the day off. Frank blinked in confusion. Excuse me. I said, take the day off. Go home. He chuckled nervously. Ma'am, you don't have the authority to... I reached into my purse and pulled out my business card, sliding it across the desk to him. I'm Dora Thompson, Chairwoman and CEO of Heartland Health Systems. As of last week, we acquired Memorial Hospital in a private transaction that hasn't been publicly announced yet. So yes, I do have the authority. Frank stared at the card, then back at me, his mouth slightly open. He picked up the phone and dialed an extension. Dr. Harris, this is Frank at Maternity Security. I have Adora Thompson here claiming to be the new owner of the hospital. He paused, listening. Yes, sir. I'll tell her. He hung up and looked at me with new respect and a hint of fear. Dr. Harris, the hospital director, will be right down to speak with you. I nodded suddenly, feeling exhausted rather than triumphant. This wasn't how I wanted to assert myself. I didn't want to be the powerful mother-in-law who threw her weight around. But in that moment of rejection, it had been easier to fall back on my professional authority than to face my personal failure. For the record, I said quietly to Frank, who now seemed unsure whether he should stand or remain seated. I'm not going to fire you. That was just frustration talking. But I would like to speak with Dr. Harris. Frank nodded quickly. Thank you, ma'am, and congratulations on your grandson. 5 minutes later, Dr. Edward Harris, the hospital director, emerged from the elevator looking simultaneously flustered and deferential. I recognized him from the acquisition meetings, though we'd only spoken briefly. Mrs. Thompson. He extended his hand. This is unexpected. We weren't planning to announce the acquisition until next month. And I wasn't planning to reveal it today, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. But circumstances have forced my hand. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, emphasizing that I had no intention of using my position to override Julia's wishes. I understand completely, Dr. Harris assured me. Family dynamics can be complicated. What can I do to help? What I wanted was to storm into that delivery room and demand recognition of my place in my grandson's life. What I asked for instead was something entirely different. I'd like you to ensure that Mrs. Thompson and my grandson receive the best care possible. Upgrade them to the VIP suite after delivery at no charge, of course. Dr. Harris nodded. Of course. Anything else? I thought for a moment. No. And please don't mention to them that I was involved. I don't want to create more tension. As you wish, Mrs. Thompson. He hesitated, then added, would you like me to arrange for you to be notified when the baby arrives? No, I said softly. My son will contact me when they're ready. I returned to the waiting room, my emotions in turmoil. On one hand, I felt a small satisfaction at having demonstrated my power. On the other, I felt ashamed for having resorted to it and deeply sad that it had come to this. The waiting room was nearly empty now. I sat alone with my gift bag, wondering if I would even get the chance to give it to my grandson today. At 5:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Will. Mom, it's a boy. Thomas James Thompson, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, perfectly healthy. Julia did amazing. Both resting now. Attached was a photo of a red-faced, squinting newborn, wrapped in a hospital blanket. My grandson, named Thomas after my father. Tears welled in my eyes as I studied every pixel of the image. I wanted to ask when I could come see them, but instead, I simply replied, he's beautiful. Congratulations to you both. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. I gathered my things and left the hospital, the gift bag still in hand. My grandson had been born, and I had not been there to welcome him. The drive home felt longer than ever. 2 days passed without a visit or even a phone call from Will. I received a few more photos of baby Thomas. By text, each one treasured and saved immediately to my phone. I responded with appropriate enthusiasm, but didn't press for more information about when I might be allowed to meet him. On Thursday afternoon, Will showed up at my front door unannounced. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble on his normally clean-shaven face. But there was a new light in his eyes that I recognized as the transformation of fatherhood. Will, I pulled him into a hug. Come in. How are Julia and the baby? They're good, he said, following me into the living room. Thomas is a champion eater and sleeper so far. Julia's recovering well, but she's exhausted. We sat down and I poured coffee for both of us. There was an awkward tension in the air that neither of us seemed ready to address. Finally, Will broke the silence. Mom, I need to apologize for what happened at the hospital. I should have insisted you be allowed in. It's okay, I said automatically, though we both knew it wasn't. No, it's not. Will ran a hand through his hair. Julia has been dealing with some pretty severe anxiety throughout the pregnancy. Her doctor thinks she might be experiencing prenatal depression that's transitioning to postpartum depression. She's been paranoid about everything going wrong, and somehow she got it into her head that having too many people around would increase the risk of complications. I didn't know, I said softly. I would have been more understanding if I'd known she was struggling. Will nodded. I should have told you. I was trying to protect her privacy, but in doing so, I hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm just glad everyone is healthy, I said. When can I meet my grandson? Will hesitated. That's the other thing I need to talk to you about. Julia found out that Heartland Health acquired Memorial. One of the nurses mentioned the upgrade to the VIP suite and said it came from the new ownership. I closed my eyes briefly. I didn't mean for her to find out that way. She's convinced you engineered the whole acquisition just to control her birth experience, Will said. She's feeling even more threatened now. That's ridiculous, I protested. The acquisition has been in the works for months. It's purely coincidental that it finalized right before she gave birth. And I specifically asked them not to mention my involvement with the room upgrade. I know that, Will assured me. But Julia's not thinking rationally right now. She feels like her one safe space has been invaded. I took a sip of my coffee, trying to process this. So what now? Am I never going to meet my grandson? Of course you will, Will said quickly. That's why I'm here. I've convinced Julia to let you visit this Sunday. At our house, not the hospital. She'll be discharged tomorrow. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me. I won't overstay my welcome. I just want to meet him. Will nodded. There's one more thing. Julia asked that we not publicize the connection between you and Memorial Hospital, at least not right now. She doesn't want people at work thinking she's getting special treatment. Fine, I agreed. The public announcement isn't scheduled until next month anyway. I won't mention it. Will's relief was palpable. Thanks, Mom. I promise things will get better. Julia just needs time to adjust to motherhood. Once she feels more secure, I know she'll be more open to you being involved. I wasn't entirely convinced, but for my son's sake and for my chance to be part of my grandson's life, I was willing to wait. Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness. I spent an hour choosing my outfit, wanting to look nice, but not too formal. I settled on a simple blue dress that Will had once complimented. I gathered the gifts I had prepared, careful not to bring too many, and drove to their modest two-bedroom house in the suburbs. Will greeted me at the door with a warm hug. Come in, Mom. They're in the living room. I followed him inside, my heart pounding. Julia sat on the couch, baby Thomas cradled in her arms. She looked up as I entered, her expression guarded, but not hostile. Hello, Dora, she said. Come meet your grandson. I approached slowly, as if moving toward a skittish animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. Hello, Julia. How are you feeling? Tired, she admitted. But good. I sat beside her, careful to leave space between us. Thomas was even more beautiful in person than in the photos, with a cap of dark hair like Will's, and the most perfect tiny fingers I had ever seen. Would you like to hold him? Julia asked, surprising me. I'd love to, I breathed. She carefully transferred the swaddled bundle into my arms, the weight of him so small, yet so substantial, brought tears to my eyes. He blinked up at me with unfocused newborn eyes, and I felt a love so profound it almost hurt. Hello, Thomas, I whispered. I'm your grandma, Dora. Julia watched us, something softening in her expression. We named him after your father, she said. Will told me how close you were to him. The gesture touched me deeply. Despite everything, they had chosen to honor my family in their son's name. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. My father would have been so proud. We spent an hour together, Will showing me the nursery they had prepared Julia, explaining their feeding and sleeping schedule. It was all very civil, even pleasant at times, but there was still an undercurrent of tension. When Thomas began to fuss, Julia took him for feeding, and Will suggested we step outside to the back patio. Once we were alone, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Mom, Julia and I had a long talk after I visited you. She's willing to try to improve your relationship, but she needs to know you respect our boundaries." "Of course I do," I said. "Do you?" Will challenged gently. "You've always been used to taking charge, fixing problems, making things happen. That works in business, but family is different." I thought about the hospital, how my first instinct when thwarted had been to assert my power. "You're right," I admitted. "I do have trouble stepping back, but I'm willing to learn." Will nodded. "Julia has agreed to weekly visits, Sunday afternoons if that works for you. She asks that you call before bringing gifts for Thomas, so she doesn't feel overwhelmed." "I can do that," I agreed. When we went back inside, Julia had returned with a now sleeping Thomas. She looked at me, then took a deep breath. "Dora, I want to apologize for not allowing you in the delivery room. I was overwhelmed and anxious, and I handled it badly." Her honesty surprised me. "Thank you for saying that. And I'm sorry too for making you feel pressured throughout your pregnancy. I was so excited about the baby that I didn't consider how my actions might affect you." Julia nodded. "I know you meant well, and I know it's important for Thomas to have a relationship with his grandmother. I just need to feel like I'm still in control of my family." "I understand," I said, and for the first time I truly did. "Your family, your rules. I'm just grateful to be included." Something shifted between us in that moment. Not a complete resolution, but the beginning of understanding. We were two women who loved the same people fiercely. Perhaps that could be enough common ground to build upon. As I prepared to leave, I took one last look at my sleeping grandson. Sometimes, to stay close to the people we love, we have to learn when to step back, I told Julia. I'm learning that lesson late in life, but I'm learning. Julia smiled a genuine smile that reached her eyes. It's never too late to learn new things. Thomas is going to teach us all a lot, I think. I left their home with a lighter heart than I'd had in months. The road ahead might still have its bumps, but for the first time, I could see a path forward. 6 months have passed since that day at the hospital, when a security guard told me I wasn't considered close family. Thomas is growing into a happy, curious baby who lights up when he sees his grandmother every Sunday. Julia and I have reached a comfortable understanding. She no longer sees my offers of help as attempts to control, and I have learned to ask before jumping in with solutions. Last month, she even called me on her own to ask if I could watch Thomas while she went for a job interview at a clinic with better hours. The announcement of Heartland Health's acquisition of Memorial Hospital went public without incident. Julia was initially anxious about her colleagues' reactions, but when nothing changed in her daily work life, she relaxed. She even jokes now about having an inside connection with the boss. Will tells me he's never seen two more stubborn women make such an effort to get along. "It's like watching two porcupines try to hug," he said once, making both Julia and me laugh, because we knew it was true. The truth is, becoming a grandmother has changed me in ways I never expected. I've stepped back from the day-to-day operations of my company, appointing a capable CEO, while I remain as board chairwoman. My priorities have shifted. Watching Thomas discover the world, seeing the joy he brings to Will and Julia, has shown me what really matters. I used to think my legacy was the healthcare system I built from nothing. Now, I understand that the real legacy is the love we leave behind in the hearts of those who matter most. I'm still learning how to balance my natural take-charge personality with the gentler approach needed for family relationships. But every Sunday, when I hold Thomas in my arms and see him smile in recognition, I know the effort is worth it. Family is complicated. The lines that define close family aren't always drawn where we expect them to be. Sometimes they need to be redrawn with patience, understanding, and respect. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is not exercise the power they have. Have you ever had to step back from someone you love to ultimately get closer to them? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found something valuable in my story today, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be navigating their own complicated family dynamics. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the strongest boundaries are the ones we respect before they're ready to come down.